Good evening to you all, and want to welcome you to this evening's webinar, which is brought to you by the advisory services in the Roscommon Longford region. This evening, the title of the webinar is Management of the Ewe Pre-Lambing. And my name is Seán Doorley. I'm a Chagas advisor based in the Longford office, and I'll be your host this evening. For the format for this evening, we have two speakers, Michael Conroy and James Kelly. Will be both presenting for 20 minutes each. After that, we'll have approximately 20 minutes for questions. Questions will be looked after by Eoghan Callaghan. And there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and questions can be submitted there. All questions will be answered live. There'll be no typed answers to questions, and questions can be submitted at any time during the webinar, but we won't answer those until the end. So this webinar will be going on for approximately an hour, so ensure if you're on a mobile phone to have your phone well charged. And as I say, we're joined by two speakers, Michael Conroy and James Kelly. Both Michael and James are advisors based in the Roscommon office. Michael will be covering nutrition of the ewe pre-lambing, and James will be covering flock health pre-lambing. And just before we get started, I have a few things just to mention regards closing dates and up and coming events. So first of all, I'll just remind you about the Sheep Census. The closing date by post for the return of the Sheep Census is the 31st of January. And if you wish to submit it online, you need to have it submitted by the 14th of February. And the census date that you're working off is the 31st of December. And second thing I just want to mention is the Chagas National Sheep Conference, which is taking place at the end of the month. It's going to be run virtually again this year, and it's going to be run over 2 evenings, the 25th and the 27th of January. That's both evenings. The webinar will be starting at 8 p.m. The first evening of the conference, Michael Gutsting will be covering the area of feed and fertilizer costs on the sheep farms this year, and trying to minimize costs while at the same time maximizing output on sheep farms. On the evening, Michael will also be joined by a representative from Board BIA looking at the global sheep meat outlook for 2022. The second session then will take place on the 27th of November. On that evening, Dwayne Shields, who is a PhD student, covering the whole area of reducing lamb mortality. And there will also be a vet from the Department of Agriculture present who will be looking at the whole area of the new veterinary medicine regulations that are coming into place. So that's the National Chagas Sheep Conference taking place the 25th, 27th, starting at 8 p.m. each evening. Thirdly, I just want to mention we are running another sheep webinar locally here by the advisors in the Roscommon Longford region on the 7th of February, and we'll be covering the whole area of lamb mortality, and that webinar will again be starting at 8 p.m. and anyone who is on this webinar will be notified about that and how to register. And fourth thing I will just mention then is the sheep welfare scheme for 2022. Any farmer who is already in the sheep welfare scheme will be automatically rolled over for the coming year. And any new entrants to sheep have an opportunity to join the sheep welfare scheme. Now, a new entrant is somebody the definition for a new entrant is somebody who first got a flock number in the calendar year of 2021, or where there's existing herd owners, somebody who first got into sheep by the 31st of October 2021. So that's the description of the new entrants, and they are eligible to join the sheep welfare scheme this year. Application for those new entrants is the 31st of January. Application forms can be got by contacting the Department of Agriculture by phone, by email, and they will send you an application form out. So if you wish to join that scheme, contact the Department of Agriculture or contact your local Chagas office, and we'll give you the details on how to contact the department and get those application forms sent out. Okay, so without further delay, I will ask our first speaker, Michael Conroy, just to start sharing his presentation there. And I'll ask both James and Eoghan to switch off their cameras there. And okay.
Okay, Seán, thanks very much.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk a small bit about tonight is just, and I suppose you've all heard it before, is concentration supplement to use in late pregnancy. And I suppose over the last years, sheep have been very buoyant in a very good trade. And the big thing is to try and keep as many lambs as possible alive. And I just sort of put a small figure on it and look at the reduced lamb mortality with the financial benefits. And look at 100 Joe flocks selling, we'll say what, we're selling 145 lambs. If you only save 5 extra lambs in that flock, right? And that is not an awful lot of sheep. And we put a cost on them there, a price on them there, 110 a piece, which is about 550 euros. So that's a net profit, we'll say, of 550 per ewe. But if we go on the lamb situation, we're selling 150 lambs, they're 20 kilo carcass weights. It's an extra 18 cents per kilo, which is about €3.60 per lamb, which is a sizable, amount of profit. And I suppose, look at a lot of people might say five extra lambs is very little, but basically it's not a lot in the sense of 100 ewes. So I suppose just a small bit in relation to, I suppose, why we'll say feeding ewes or pre-lambing is so important. And look at, I don't have to tell you, you know all this yourself, and the effect of underfeeding in late pregnancy. Well, like the first thing you've got light and weak lambs. That's the first thing you're going to encounter. And you know yourself the amount of time that's taken up trying to keep those alive, but invariably some of them are going to die in spite of you. And if we talk about Chagas surveys in relation to, lambs that are 2.5 kilos, you can have mortality rates something between 30 and 40%. And I suppose when we look at the likes of these two lambs here, you can see here they're well fleshed. They have a good cover of fat on them. And the idea of that is that it protects them from getting hypothermia. So they're able to withstand a bit of cold weather. If you have that light, thin lamb, he'll have a hump on him. And in a lot of situations, you won't have to worry going to the mare to the factory with him. The second thing is in relation to underfeeding in late pregnancy is thin yolks. And that'll culminate in poor quality and volume of beestons or colostrum. And if basically the lamb, the first feed he gets, if he gets a good feed of colostrum, basically he's halfway there to keeping him alive. The other thing is, and James will touch on it later on, if you're vaccinating, the lamb has no immunity. It's got through the colostrum. If there's no colostrum there, well, basically your vaccinations has been a waste of time. The other thing is in relation to underfeeding is high lamb and ewe mortality. And also in relation to ewes thin lambing down, they're not going to milk well after the lamb down. So basically, I'll go on and I'll talk a small bit later on in relation to, the feed requirements of a ewe. But basically, you're going to have lower lactation milk yield and also lighter lambs at weaning. So they're going to be lambs that are going to be longer on the farm. So look I'm not going to ask you to memorize these figures, but just to give you an idea, basically 1 unit of energy is a kilo of barley, of dry barley, right? So if I have a dry ewe, basically 2 pounds of barley, if the full energy requirement is given by 0.8 of a kilo or 2 pounds of barley. But if we go to the period 2 to 1 weeks before lambing, you're talking about her energy requirement goes up by over 60%. to 1.4. So instead of 1.8 of a kilo just to get the energy in, now she wants 1.4 kilos of dried barley. But we're talking about all the feeds that go into her, but basically there's a 60% increase in the energy requirement of the ewe. If we talk about after lambing, her energy requirement goes up threefold to 2.5. Now, in a situation like that, even at €7, you're not going to be going out giving your ewes 2.5 kilos of meal in order to feed them. So in that situation, she physically can't eat that amount, so she has to milk off her back. And if she hasn't got flesh on her back, she can't milk off her back. So basically, she's not going to she's not going to have the milk yield, and the lambs are going to suffer. In relation to the protein, you're looking at 130 grams of protein. We'll say for a dry ewe, 8-10 weeks out of lambing, where it increased by over 60% again to the 2 to 1 weeks before lambing, and that goes up to 215 grams, and it doubles again. You can see. So if after lambing, if we talk about getting plenty of milk into the ewe after lambing, you have to have grass. And basically that's you can always see, when they go out to grass, they just jump, because basically jump in milk yield because there's protein there, but also their intake goes up. So I suppose just in relation to the protein, we'll talk a bit about the types of protein you need later on. So why is this massive increase in energy requirement of the ewe? So what's happening, you've seen this before, 70% of the lamb birth weight comes in the last 6 weeks before lambing. So you can see here that basically your lambs are growing, but at the same time, what's happening? This is the ewe 12 weeks out of lambing. There's her room in her stomach, and there's the small lamb there. No pressure on the stomach there. She can eat her 5 kilos of silage, no problem at all. But when we get to the week 20, so the week before lambing, what happens in a situation like this is you have 2 lambs in her, two single lamb, or a double lamb, which is 10 kilos a lamb. You have 7 kilos of birth fluid. So the 17 kilos, if you take there, the 17 kilos of, we'll say, between lambs and fluids in here, what's happening is it's putting pressure on the stomach of the cow or of the ewe. So basically, she cannot physically eat enough. So you have to supplement her with concentrates in that period coming up to lambing. So I suppose what I'd say is the energy requirement is going up, the lamb birth weight is going up, but her facility, the capacity of the stomach is going down. So I suppose in relation to the first, and most farms, the first, the winter feed is silage. So when we talk about silage, you're looking at the very best you can make. And it's not enough that cheap meat. You have a chopped bale of silage, it'll do 150 euro a day. You're in for 2, basically it's roughly 60-50 euro. Talking about silage that's made in the 3rd week of May, good quality. This is the silage that we've got in relation to when we look here. Well, I'm running into problems here.
Yeah, your presentation just went there.
How is it now? Is it back?
No, not back there yet.
Oh, hold on a second. Right, is there, Seán?
Yeah, just put.
Right.
Yeah, great.
So basically, when we talk about silage, we're looking at dry matter. This is the silage, and you can see it's very rare. Most of the silages we get are roughly 60, we'll say 60 to 65 or 67 DMD. This is the silage that was made in the 3rd week of May. It was grazed in the spring, and you're looking at silage, maybe 6 bales to the acre, very, very leafy type silage. The dry matter, you're looking at high dry matter, 31%. The pH is 4.3, which is very, very good, because the dry matter is high. That's a good pH. Ammonia levels less than 10%. In this situation, they're 7.8. And ash levels less than 8.6, they're 8.9, so they're thereabouts. Fiber 40%, and if we take our DMD here, 79.7. So it's exceptionally good quality silage. And it is like, this is silage that can be made. Look, at the weather was good when it was made, so I suppose that was the benefit there too. And the protein levels are very good at 16.4%. So I suppose when we talk about silage, so you're looking at, high dry matter, a fairly high dry matter, well preserved, and also a very good DMD and good protein. So when we talk about silage, this is the type of silage we're talking about, that you can look down to the base of the sward and it's green right down to the base of the sward. So when we talk about the O at, we'll say 77 DMD silage, it's equivalent, and a kilo dry matter of this is equivalent nearly to 90% of a kilo of barley. Whereas if we go down to the 60 DMD silage, it's only a 0.66. So what's the effect of this, right? And we look at it here, I suppose in relation to the silage, and I'll just take two in a situation like this. This is our silage here, 75 DMD, right? In a situation where they're getting that ad lib. So basically what happens with silage is you should have chopped bales. And what happens in relation to silage is that the higher the DMD, the more of it they'll eat, but also the shorter the chop, the more of it they'll eat. So in a situation like this, 75 DMD silage, you'll get away, and that means that it's fed fresh every day or every second day, that it's not allowed to accumulate in front of them for 3 or 4 or 5 days, because basically the intake is going to go down, and that they have a good access to it. But if we take 75 DMD silage, you have 0.1 of a kilo of meal 5 to 6 weeks before lambing, going up to roughly 2 pounds of meal in the last week before lambing, right? Whereas if you go down to the one at 65, you want to start feeding them maybe 10 weeks out of lambing, 0.1 of a kilo, and going up to 2 pounds, 0.8 of a kilo in the last 2 weeks before lambing. If we talk about the difference, how much silage or how much meal is fed, in a situation here, right, basically there's 20 kilos of meal fed, whereas if we go down to the 65, there's an extra 15 kilos, which at 350 a ton is roughly over it's a €5 extra cost. Now, I suppose in relation to the silage, there is making that better quality silage, there is a bit of extra cost too, because you're not going to have you're not going to have as much yield on it, but basically you need very, very good, if you're more than in profit by making that very good quality silage. So I suppose just in relation to, so that's the silage, and I'll talk a small bit just I suppose in relation to the meal now. So basically, the first thing you look at is the ration. And if we say yours eat 20, 30, if you go back to the very good quality, poor quality size, you could be eating maybe 50 kilos of meal. And I suppose in relation to energy, what's high energy? Your cereals are high energy. Your citrus pulp and your barley are high energy. Your citrus pulp and your beet pulp is high energy. Soybean meal is high energy. And also your distillers grains. So they have an energy value similar to barley. When we go here, these have about 90% the energy value. So that's your maize gluten, your soya hulls, and your rapeseed meal. So they have basically an energy value of about 90%, 92% the energy value of barley. But when we go down here and look at these ones, and these are the ones you don't want in a ration, or you want them especially below molasses, that they're very low, we'll say low levels in inclusion in the ration. If we take our palm kernel, it has an energy value about 0.85. If we take our sunflower, it has only an energy value of about 0.55. So it's not much more than half the energy value of barley, and our wheat feed is something around the 0.7. Is what you're looking at. Most people look at protein, and what I'd say about the protein is that should be made by soybean meal, because basically there are two that's broken down in the stomach by the bacteria in the stomach, and there's also protein that's broken down Right. When we talk about ingredients, then we're looking at soybean. Basically, soybean is the main ingredient in the protein. So when we go on, we look at a label for protein, right? When we look at a label on the bag, right? The first thing is your crude protein is 19%, your crude fiber is 9%, right? So your oils are going to be low because there's a lot of cereal in it, and your ash should be around 8%. If it's very, very high ash, well, then it takes energy to get rid of the ash. So the ingredients should be in the descending order. So you're talking about, in this situation, you have maize, barley, you have soybean dehull, soybean meal, you have rapeseed meal, and then you have soya hulls, which is your fiber source. You have wheat distillers, which is a good protein source as well, but our molasses is roughly 4%. But these are the lads we don't want, but they're still under 4%, so they're going to have very little effect, not a lot of effect on the quality of the ration. And then good level of minerals and vitamins. So I suppose, just in conclusion, what I would say is, if you're feeding sheep, get your silage tested, see what quality it is. And it isn't just go into one bale and take a fistful out of it and bring it and see basically what you want to open 2 or 3 bales and take a sample out of the 3 bales, mix them up and get them tested. The other thing is that you feed according to litter size, and if you have a thin double, maybe put her in with the triples. If you have a thin single, put her in with the doubles. Also, in relation to rattle curler, or if you got them scanned, well, when you get them scanned, the later ones, take them out and feed them, because basically I suppose at meal at 350, 400 euros a ton, you don't want to feed them when there's no need. You don't want to feed them the high levels when they're not lambing for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. The other thing, I suppose, have a plentiful supply of water. Yours will drink basically between 2 and 3 gallons of water. So that's roughly 8 to 10 litres of water. So make sure that there's a plentiful supply of clean water. The other thing is, and I suppose, look, there's a big thing here in relation to, feeding yours. Will I hold off? Ration is dear. Maybe I'd get away with holding off for 2 weeks before I start feeding them. That could be the 2 weeks cost you a lot of money after lambing, because basically if yours lose condition, they have to milk off their back after lambing. So if they lose condition in those 2 weeks, basically they won't have the flesh on their backs to milk off their backs. So they're going to, lambs won't thrive as well. And I suppose, look, at the other thing is have a supply of grass after lambing. So that's basically it, Seán. Sorry for the technical glitches and I suppose internet coverage.
That's no problem. Yeah, we had a few internet issues in the office this evening, and Michael did very well there, despite a few interruptions. So you can just stop sharing your screen there, Michael. Just I suppose, while James is getting ready there, I'll mention maybe a few health and safety aspects that this was important. This was during lambing season, and that to try and get plenty of rest, and that and busy, a very busy lambing season. Better if more rest you have, and that that less accident risks of accidents taking place, and possibly look to get a bit of help if possible, if that option is there, avail of it. Also, I suppose important was to keep your hands washed and be wearing gloves and that. And I suppose when you go to eat yourselves, keep your hands washed, just prevent the spread of any zoonotic diseases and that. So look at a few safety aspects to mention there. So thanks very much again, Michael, for that. Just look at a few interruptions. We've had a few technical issues there with internet and that, and I'll ask James now to prepare his presentation.
Okay, folks, I'm going to do a presentation here on flock health pre-lambing. This would be basically on the ewe. We're going to look at the ewe from, say, now mid-pregnancy to, say, lambing, so from about 90 days to 147 days. Again, as Michael said, this is going to have a huge effect on the profitability of any sheep farm. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a target of less than 12% mortality. We're looking at less than 12% mortality. So where are we today? Today we're after scanning ewes. Most farms in the county at the moment will be scanning. That's a fairly average scanning rate we have there of 1.8 lambs per ewe. Most are lambing in March, and we go ahead and we wean in July at 1.6. So if you look here, if you can see my mouse moving there, we're here today at scanning, lambing in March, weaning 1.6. So it's this period here between scanning and March that I'm going to focus on. Now, as Seán said earlier, we're going to have another webinar which is going to be looking at lamb mortality, and we can focus more on, say, the lambs when they're coming out. So to go from 1.8 scanning to 1.6 weaning, you are talking about 12% mortality. So that's what we're trying to stay under if we can at all. So two main factors that affect mortality is the disease of the ewe and the disease of the lamb. So the diseases of the ewe will be up to pre-lamb, and the diseases of the lamb will be when the lamb is on the ground. So what can I do now to reduce this year's losses? So we're going to look here at what we can do in the next couple of weeks with our ewe flock, how we can manage them better so that we're going to cut down on these losses. So there's 4 key focus areas we've picked here to discuss tonight. One is metabolic disorders. That's a lot to do with nutrition. We've picked out a few of ones that crop up on every 100 ewes, say. Laboratory testing, absolutely essential. We're going to go through that there. That's to do with abortion. It's to do with Zootic Abortion, Toxoplasmosis, etc. Vaccinations, we're going to look at clostridial vaccinations, basically passing on passive immunity from the ewes to the lambs to cut down on lamb mortality. And parasites also we're going to touch on in terms of fluke worms. Fluke will be the main one there. Now, fluke hasn't appeared as an huge issue this year relative to other years due to the lack of rain the last month or so. So the first key focus area I'm going to look at there is metabolic disorders. This is all really to do with nutrition, how the ewes are being fed. Michael there, his previous presentation, he looked at what was in the diets. This slide here is more to do with the management of feeding. So most ewes are fed, listen, they're fed indoors, they're fed outdoors. They're not fed on ad lib meal feeding when they're pregnant. You're feeding ewes for, say, 6-7 weeks pre-lambing. You're not feeding them ad lib. So what sort of space do they need? You're talking, as a rule of thumb, a ewe needs 2 foot of trough space. We have 450 there to 600 mils indoors. So we're talking 2 foot. Outdoors, it can be a little bit less, 300 mils, obviously, because the ewe can eat both sides of it. Do you know what I mean? But the key here is that all ewes will be able to eat the meal together. And another small little thing, like a lot of people will feed ewes, they'll put them below a gate. You know, if people go feeding ewes, they'll come in, they'll knock you over. A lot of people will put them the other side of a gate, then put out their meal and then open their gate. But you have to look at the practicalities of it. If you have 150 ewes running through a 10-foot gate, they're obviously going to be hitting the piers of it. So the facilities to avoid hurts, be able to open the gates quickly, be able to let them all flow through. None of them getting hit on sharp corners around yards, getting hit, you know, butts of walls, piers out, everything. It's about avoiding them hurts. And corners and pens for ewes that are indoors, like, it's about, remember, when you go into a corner, you lose a lot of space feeding. So we're talking, when the corners are taken into account, we're talking 2 foot of feed space per ewe. And the whole point of this is that every ewe will get her required amount of feed in the day. Now, problems start to arise when a ewe isn't getting her allocation. So Michael there was talking about ewes. Michael there was talking. Michael there was talking about, I'll just turn off my camera there now for a moment, internet. Michael there was talking about feed management, what's in the ration, but it's all about getting the allocation into the ewe, getting the required amount into her daily. Otherwise, you'll get metabolic disorders. Common one here, twin lamb disease. As it said, twin lamb disease, the ewe has 2 lambs. Obviously, it's self-explanatory. What's the sign of it? You get a very lackluster ewe, like the ewe on the picture there. She's sitting down. How has this happened? It has happened because of inadequate nutrition. Going back to the previous slide, it's happened because this ewe is not getting her allocation of meal. She may be lame. She mightn't be getting the space at the trough. Various different things. She might be fasting for a while. What happens here is the ewe starts using the fat on her back, and instead of using food, she starts utilizing her own body reserves. She starts, ketosis comes along, ketones. So how do we treat it? We treat it with glycerol. There's a product there, Ketovish, Chantatal, Reviver, etc. You get in early with it, give the 60 mils of these products for a couple of days, the ewe will stand up. You would be inclined to cull ewes that have this. If a ewe comes right and she has lambs and everything, you would be inclined to cull that ewe for the next season. But prevention is everything here. Feed management, enough trough space, make sure they're all okay. Even a lame ewe, lameness is a precursor to twin lamb disease. Do you know what I mean? Second one here, prolapse, very common on farms, on some farms. Again, down to feed management. Everybody is going to see a case of this prolapse. Again, down to nutrition. The ewe is eating, not getting enough meal. It happens a lot with multiples. It happens where ewes have 2-3 lambs into them. They're trying to eat too much forage. They're not getting enough meal. Basically, the ewe is forcing. How do we deal with it? You have to wash the uterus, clean it, push it back in. You'll either use prolapse spoons, harnesses. But again, what I want to focus on this evening for the next 8 weeks is how do we prevent prolapse in ewes? Like, how do we prevent prolapse in ewes? Is we scan our sheep, ewes with triplets, we give them a little bit extra meal, so they're not eating that continuous amount of, they're not eating too much roughage, hence prolapsing. So the prevention here is down to proper nutrition as well. And once the ewe prolapses a little bit, put the harness on, mark her for culling, keep an eye on her, maybe take her out. If she starts prolapsing a little bit, put a harness on her, maybe let her out, keep her away from bulky feeds, so that she won't be eating silage. Maybe put her on grass, it will go through quicker. The food will go through her quicker. Cull sheep again, as they do reoffend, no doubt about it. These will be reoffenders as they go through. So basically what we covered there is just good feed management, if you know what I mean. Make sure each ewe is eating her correct allocated amount every day. Next thing we're looking at here is abortions. These are going to happen on farms over the next couple of weeks. Like, you go out someday, say a farmer has 60 ewes, one ewe has aborted. What do? You probably ignore it. Go out 2 days later, another ewe has aborted. Do you ignore it? So what we'd be advocating here is every abortion should be treated as if it's a storm or if it's coming. The key here on abortion in ewes in the next 6 weeks is testing. I have a picture there of swabs that can be got in farm labs in Elphin. So basically, if you're in farm labs in Elphin, you get that swab, you swab the sample, you can stick it back in the post, send it down, and you'll get a result. So I cannot emphasize enough, you need to test to find out why ewes are aborting. Now, obviously, some are going to abort because of hurts. They might get hurt at, like I said previously, at feed management. But there will be agents there like Zootic and Toxoplasmosis. But the solution to abortion is get a correct diagnosis, and we can only do that by testing. So background to abortion, an acceptable level, less than 2%. Less than 1% of aborted fetuses are submitted to the lab annually. So a lot of farmers, it's commonplace just to ignore it, or this happens. Like, a lot of farmers will accept a certain level of abortion, like they'll accept 4 or 5 ewes aborted lambs, move on, that's it. Do you know what I mean? But they'll accept it. They might say it's toxoplasmosis, but the thing about it is, unless it's diagnosed, you don't know what it is. It's not possible to diagnose abortion by visually looking at the lamb. You have to get a test for it. So I'm going to look at the two most common causes of abortion in, say, flocks in the county, really. In zootic abortion, it's not as long around as toxoplasmosis. It's a zootic disease, so hens can be carried across to pregnant women. You know, it's very dangerous. So as Seán said there earlier, healthcare or hygiene at lambing around the house, very important, not to be going in with dirty clothes into the house, keeping your hands clean, you know, etc. And again, need to diagnose it. If you diagnose that you have zootic abortion, what do? Long acting, you're too late to vaccinate. Or the vaccination for zootic and toxoplasmosis has to be done pre-mating. Toxo has to be given, Toxovax, which is the vaccination for toxoplasmosis, has to be given 3 weeks pre-mating, and Inzovax, which is for zootic abortion, has to be given 4 weeks pre-mating. So if you get a diagnosis, say here, if you get a few ewes aborting and you get a diagnosis that it's zootic abortion, what do? Ewes will respond to a jab of oxytetracyclines every 2 weeks in late pregnancy. So you're basically looking, if you're getting a big problem with it, you're looking at going in, injecting the ewes with duocillin, etc., different tetracycline, various different, whatever the brand name is of oxytetracycline. This is a sheep-to-sheep disease, and I have a point here put in that I feel is very important. Foster ewes there. Foster ewes and pet lambs are lethal coming into a clean flock. Like you may look there and on Dundeel and you'll see an ad there, Yo lost 2 lambs this morning, loads of milk. Why did she lose the 2 lambs? Like, she lost the 2 lambs for a reason. But if you bring her into your flock, that might be your problem tomorrow. These ewes could be losing, your ewes could be losing the lambs that this ewe lost today by bringing them in. That is a real important point on that slide. Bringing in foster ewes and bringing in pet lambs. Like, the lambs are pets in a lot of cases because their mothers died. What did their mothers die of? Do you know what I mean? So bringing in foster ewes and pet lambs are a serious risk for bringing in zootic or toxoplasmosis into your flock. And sure enough, you're bringing them into your shed, not just at the right time. Do you know what I mean? It's not good at all. And that's why I'm emphasizing that point very much there on that. So the next one here, Toxoplasmosis abortion. Again, it's a zootic disease. You need to take care. What are the signs of it? You have abortion, you have reabsorbing lambs back into the ewe, you have weak lambs being born, mummified lambs. Like, a lot of people will have weak lambs being born, and they'll stay going through lambing, like, and there'll be a lot of weak lambs, as you call them. There might be one live lamb, one mummified lamb, and they'll stay going. But it's crucial, again, to go back and sample these. I can't emphasize it enough. If you could just sample a few of these mummified lambs, a few of these weak lambs, even took a swab on the weak lambs, dead lambs, etc., you will get a diagnosis. This here, caused by a parasite, toxoplasmosis, it's different to zootic, so antibiotics are going to be no use here. This is not a sheep-to-sheep disease, so it's not really a sheep-to-sheep disease. Toxoplasmosis is not going to spread in a shed like wildfire, like in zootic. The key here is contaminated feed. It will be cats, mice in on straw, cats, mice in on feed troughs. Do you know what I mean? In on hay. Even in a field, you could be feeding yours outdoors, and you could be feeding them silage. Like, okay, you're feeding them silage. The round bale of silage had wrap on it. It had plastic on it, say the day beforehand. There was no cats near the feed. You're feeding them outside in a trough. What's to say there isn't a cat at them troughs at night running along on them at 10, 11 o'clock at night when you don't see them? So there normally is a source. When it's toxoplasmosis, it is a source through contaminated feed. So they're the two key ones. The key take-home message on abortions is, or any abortions is, get on to Elfin, get 2 or 3 of them swabs sent up to you. If anything happens, take a sample, send it down, get a diagnosis, and you know where you are. You know where you are. Otherwise, you're just really guessing. And like a lot of farmers put up with a lot of abortion on farms and keep going, but they never really solve the problem. If you get a diagnosis, you start vaccinating the new sheep coming into the flock. Relatively simple. It's a €4 vaccine for Insovax or Toxovax. So let's just say you diagnose toxoplasmosis. It's a €4 shot, bringing 20 euro lambs or bringing 20 hoggets into a farm every year. It's €80. It's €80. It's not big money. And over 2 or 3 years, you have the problem eradicated out through vaccination. Clostridial diseases here is the third issue we were talking about. There's a list of them there: lamb dysentery, pulpy kidney, they are all, there's 10 of them there. So as you can see there, the products there: Heptavac P, Covexin 10, Covexin 8, Tribovax 10, any Covexin 10 and Tribovax 10 will cover the 10. Sardelli there is a very common one at the end, the one from the very bottom. It affects lambs. So most people are using the 10-in-1 vaccine now. So bacterial infections, first sign of clostridial diseases is a dead sheep, okay? So 2 shots required 4 to 6 weeks apart to get full immunity. If this is done correctly, this is done with your hoggets, say in the back end of the year, September, before they go to the ram, August, September, it's done 4 to 6 weeks apart. They're given a mill of, say, Tribovax to get up to the full immunity. It's important to do that at that time of the year as well, because Brexy there, very common clostridial disease. When the touch of frost comes here in November, it tends to be activated in the soil. So it's important to do it in the back end of the year. Once the ewe gets full immunity, an annual booster is given 4 to 6 weeks pre-lambing. Now, the key to this is you'll pass on the immunity from the ewe to the lamb. There'll be passive immunity moving from the ewe to the lamb that will last in the lamb for 3 to 12 weeks. Now, in terms of pneumonia, Heptavac P, you'll only get 4 weeks cover there going from the lamb to the ewe. But it is important. It's a relatively cheap vaccine. It is important. It's good to get it in. It will cut down on lambing losses. Again, care needs to be taken handling sheep 4 to 6 weeks. You'll handle them easy. They're in late pregnancy, so you'll handle easy. And the last point here I want to look at is lameness. Whether ewes are indoors or whether ewes are outdoors, you're going to get a level of lameness in late pregnancy. Especially with older ewes. Ewes are getting heavy. You have the fetal load of lambs. Trough spaces are dirty. Whether it be inside or outside, you get it. Obviously, when a ewe gets lame, intakes go down. They haven't the same vigor. Isolator. You're talking, give her antibiotics. But the important one here is number 2, COD, Contagious Ovine Digital Dermatitis. So basically, it's exactly the same as foot rot, but without the smell. Now, foot rot is fairly widespread on farms. We all seen it. It's a problem. You cull, foot bath, antibiotics, you get to eradicate it. This COD here is becoming more common every year. And yet it's very hard to eradicate relative to foot rot. It's a different antibiotic that's needed for it. It's a different duration of antibiotics. But if you turn over a ewe tomorrow and the foot is rotten off her and there's no smell off of it, that is COD. Whereas if you turn her over and you get the smell, it's going to be foot rot. So again, you separate infected sheep from the healthy ones. This goes for inside or outside. Like your straw bedding inside, it's going to spread like wildfire. Outside, it's going to spread at meal troughs, say at self-feeders, at hay bales, or various different feeding where you'd feed silage. So watch the condition of the sheep as well. You'll see the condition falling off lame sheep fairly quick, and that leads to all the other problems. If you get a bit of lameness in sheep, It leads on to twin lamb disease. It leads on to more problems. It's like what Michael was saying about the meal. If you're not feeding yos, it leads on to problems later on. So it's very important to watch the condition of the sheep. If they start getting lame and they start losing condition, it's time to pull them out, treat them with antibiotics, give them a bit of preferential feeding, and avoid that loss in weight, because that is going to cause you more problems later on. Spread cubical lime around the feeding areas, water troughs, etc. Now, in a lambing shed, I have a point here at the end. Do not pair lame sheep in lambing pens. Like the infection that's going around, if you pair lame sheep and they have foot rot and they're going around lambing pens, that infection, if they're on a straw bed and yours are lambing on that, that infection will go in through the navel of newborn lambs. So like, if you have these yos and they're very lame, in around the lambing period, you're talking antibiotic treatment, try and keep them separate. If they have to go in with the other bunch, give them antibiotic treatment, and you wouldn't just pair it because you are spreading the infection. And the last point I want to just mention, I didn't touch on it a lot tonight, but fluke. Certain farms are fluky farms, wet grazing. The farms where fluke are a problem, if fluke is a problem on a farm this year, it's a problem on a farm every year. We haven't had too high of rainfall, but again, if yours are losing condition, they're showing the symptoms of fluke, you go in with fluke iver, you go in with your various different flukicides to get it out, whichever one works best on your farm. But it's another issue that we just don't want to forget about, because it's nearly the issue on the same farms all the time. But there are the few issues, Seán, that I was going through. Feed management, very important. Just to summarize, feed management, very important. Make sure they're all getting their allocation of feed in the day. With the abortion of lambs, try and test. A lot of farmers don't do this. For 1 year, just ring Elfin, get 2 or 3 swabs up, just try and test, try and diagnose if there is a problem year on year there. The Claustralia vaccines, relatively cheap vaccine, it's only 60 cents a sheep. Get it into the O's and keep a tab on lameness and fluke if it's there. So Seán, we can take questions if there's anything else there.
Okay, thanks for that, James. Thanks for that excellent presentation, and also Michael for his excellent presentation. So 2 excellent presentations there, we got through the technical difficulties okay there, and everything came across very well. So look, we'll quickly move on to the Q&A session. So I'll just get my camera on there. Yeah. So look at it. We'll move over to Eoghan, and Eoghan, just you can start on the questions there for the 2 lads.
Yeah, perfect. There's loads of activity in the question section, which is always a good sign. Maybe Michael might ask you the first one. What are the advantages of feeding half whole grain and half rolled barley in ration?
Well, I suppose you can feed basically. It doesn't break down as quick. Like the whole grain doesn't break down as quick as the ground barley, and you can usually in rations it's half grain. We'll say the whole grain, it's either half whole grain and half rolled. So basically it doesn't break down as quickly in the rumen. And basically what happens is when you have a lot of tightly ground grain, you get this sudden drop in the pH in the stomach, and basically what that does is it affects the digestion of the silage.
And just a follow up to that was, is it okay to feed 100% rolled barley to hoggets?
No, I wouldn't feed 100% rolled barley to feeding hoggets, or well, basically you wouldn't feed 100% rolled barley, because what's going to happen there is you have to put a digestible fiber into the ration, and usually where you feed very, very high levels of rolled barley, and if it goes out at all, maybe it's fattening sheep, but what happens is then if they gorge themselves, basically you're going to get lambs swelling up and dying. So you have to have a digestible fiber in the thing as well.
Yep, I might ask one to James here. What are the alternatives if soybean is not available?
You'll be talking rapeseed meal. You'll be looking for a content of rapeseed meal. Again, Michael, the fineness of the nut, like if you look at a nut that has a lot of rapeseed in it, it will be, distillers is another one as well. Distillers, rapeseed are two other sources of protein in the meal. Distillers, Michael, what else would you be feeling? Distillers, rapeseed is
well, I
what you'd be
suppose
looking in.
look at the big problem with distillers is, well, I'm not saying it's a very, very good quality protein, but the copper content of it is higher. And the big problem with that is if you have, especially Texel sheep, you can lead to copper toxicity. That's why merchants, are very reluctant to put high levels of it, in rations because of the copper content of it,
Yeah.
So you'll be looking
But
at
it is. Well, like I suppose in relation to the rapeseed too, there wouldn't be very high levels in it because it's unpalatable. So you're looking at your gluten, you're looking at a bit of distillers, rapeseed as well. But the copper is the big one with the likes of, especially if you have Texel sheep, with the likes of distillers or gluten, because there's higher levels of copper in it.
You still will be better off with a lower level of. You'd still be better off with a lower content of soybean meal than going with rapeseed dough on, if you could. Like you'd be looking at the soybean content of the ration will be very important. Like the nearer you can get to 20% soybean meal content, the better.
And I suppose look at the other things there. You have the likes of sunflower. It's high in protein, 24%, but it's very, very low. It's only 50. It's only a little over half the energy value of barley. So, you can make up a ration with high-ish enough protein, but basically the energy levels could be on the floor.
Yep. Okay, we'll just move on to the next one, lads. Liam asked a question: how should your lambs be gotten ready for lambing? Did you get that one, lads?
Michael, go on ahead.
Yeah, your lambs. Well, I suppose look at the big problem with your lambs is that I suppose they're scanned was the first thing, but basically you want to try and keep condition on them. If you're feeding them a bit of meal, like if you're feeding a meal that you feed them 8 to 10 weeks out, that you don't, you don't come in with this high level of meal in the last couple of weeks, that you try and keep the condition on them and keep them growing. So, maybe feed them a small level of meal, maybe 0.1 of a kilo, but you're looking at maybe 10 weeks out of lambing and gradually increase it after that, But you'd be hoping, I suppose, in a lot of situations, they're going to be scanning singles, and I suppose 1.2 or 1.3 would be a lot of the scanning rates I see on your lambs,
Okay, I think you covered this next question, Michael. I think you covered it in your presentation. But when is the best time to make high quality silage?
Look, it's graze in the spring and cut in the 3rd week of May. You're talking about really grassy type silage. Look, you're not talking about going out and getting 10, 12 bales to the acre. Look, it is a bit more expensive to make it. You're looking at that really grassy silage that maybe 6, 7 bales to the acre, cut the 3rd week of May, but also graze in the spring. And look, for that early growth, maybe, I know it's expensive to reseed, but maybe if you had a field that was, that basically you're going to have higher DMDs if the ground is reseeded, maybe if you have a field just allocated directly for silage for sheep,
Yep, and might put this one to you, James. Next question that came in. We are feeding our ewes maize silage and they're in very good condition. With ewes in this good condition, how do you manage prolapse?
Could you say that again there, Owen? I just didn't get that.
Yeah, so we are feeding our ewes maize silage and they're in great condition. With these ewes in good condition, how do you manage prolapse?
And is there cases of prolapse with that?
No. It's not said here, but I presume there must be an issue on farm.
There will be cases of prolapse there. You restrict it. You restrict it as good as you can. If you're given that quantity, if you're given maize silage ad lib, obviously the sheep are going to stay eating as much of it as they can. Like maize silage will be very palatable relative to grass silage. So you would you'd try and restrict the level of maize silage that you'd be feeding. the more you'll be feeding it, the more they'd eat and more likelihood of prolapsing like.
Yep.
And I suppose just the other thing in relation to maize silage is it's very low in protein and it's low in minerals as well. So make sure you have it balanced in that situation,
Yep, that's perfect. Michael, might ask you this next one. So yours were in good condition last year. We were feeding oats and soybean 6 weeks before lambing, but a number of them had no milk when they first lambed. They came into milk a day later. What is the reason for this?
Well, I suppose the first thing you have to look at is, look at protein that drives milk. And basically are they getting enough protein? When we talk about that week or two before, we'll say before 2 weeks before lambing, 200 grams of protein. If you're feeding 100 grams of soy, it's only 46 grams of protein. So I suppose, there's a number of things you have to look at. The first thing you have to look at, like oats isn't as high in energy as barley, but it is a very safe feed. So I suppose the energy they're getting, are they getting enough protein? And I suppose the third thing is, are you feeding a mineral? Like it's very important, calcium, phosphorus, are you feeding a mineral with it? Are they getting a mineral? Are they getting calcium into it? Because that's very important as well. So I suppose it's a culmination of everything. I suppose you can't give a definitive answer until you see exactly what is being fed. But the other one, the one I would be looking at there would be, I suppose, the protein that they're getting into them, but also the mineral. Are they getting the mineral?
Yep. I assume this next one, James.
Yep.
Just any measures to prevent milk fever? There was ewes lost last year despite early detection of vet treatment. The ewes were fed indoors. They had access to meal and molasses.
Okay, I've seen that before. It will be mainly, you get that common enough on horned ewes or maybe mule ewes. The theory behind that one there is a calcium magnesium is to do with muscle tone, ewes going down, Dim ewes, did it state that they were in late pregnancy or anything on?
No, didn't know.
No, it's you could get it. You could get ewes going down, coming in late pregnancy. Then when ewes are going out, calcium, magnesium, basically keep buckets in front of them if you could. Mineral buckets.
Yep.
And the treatment then, obviously, if they go down, the treatment is giving them calcium, magnesium. You're giving them 100 mils of magnesium, do you know what I mean, in multiple different locations. You're giving them 60 mils of calcium, 10 mils in different 10 mils in each different location. Have it lukewarm for absorption. But if yours do go down with that and they do get the treatment, it should be fairly rapid. They should be up again and moving again 20 minutes later, like 30 minutes later, if they're got in time, like. Okay.
Yep. Perfect. Just maybe one for you, Michael. Just can singles get too big if you feed them for twins? On ewes maybe where they're not scanned.
Oh, definitely. And I suppose, look at in relation to when we go back, I suppose Willie Murphy that worked in Knockbeg for years, he penned his lamb according to condition score. And basically the lambs will get too big and you're going to have higher losses. And that's why scanning or condition score them as well. Like it's if you're having them scanned, just pull out the very fed ones, because they are probably the ones that are, that have singles in them,
Yep. And maybe one, James.
Yep.
For you, what vaccination protocol do you do for Claustralia? If you don't know the vaccination status of purchased hoggets, do you give them the 2 initial shots?
If you don't know the vaccination status, it's like a chart, if I could say. You give them 2 shots 4 to 6 weeks apart. So the first shot drives you up to 60% cover, say. The remaining shot, the second shot 4 to 6 weeks apart, will drive you up to 100% cover. Then over the course of the year, that 100% is going to drop off. So that's why the annual booster comes in every March. The reason the booster is given at March is because you're getting the effect of the vaccine as a booster, and you're getting the passive immunity moving from the ewe across to the lamb. So you have the added benefit of you're given the other booster and the vaccine across, or the passive immunity across to the lamb. But definitely a lot of farmers give one shot to get up to 60%, and they have some level of cover, but they don't have 100% cover. Now, just to cover one point on this, about 3 years ago, there was a trial done on about 12 farms in South Roscommon on sheep mortality. Every sheep was looked at. And like one of the main findings of that result that came out of at Lone Regional Veterinary Lab was Claustralia diseases is still a substantial killer of sheep, be it adult sheep, be it lambs, etc. A lot of farmers don't vaccinate against it, but it is one of the key killers of sheep out there. So 2 shots and an annual booster.
Yep. And just another question of vaccines that came in. Is there a foot rot vaccine available?
Yeah, footvax. It would be very common on pedigree sheep. You know, if you were selling pedigree rams, you'd be looking at it on a commercial farms. A lot of farmers don't vaccinate for footvax. If there was foot rot, if there was a serious problem and it was, if foot bathing would zinc, say colon, antibiotics wasn't doing it, you could look at footvax at bringing the problem under control.
Okay. And just the last question, I might put to you, Michael. There's no more coming in. Is it okay to feed silage if there's mold visible? Or what level of mold, I suppose, is it okay to feed until?
Definitely no mold. The thing about silage is, like, I suppose in relation to sheep, is they're very, very sensitive, and you know, can cause abortion. So if there's any mold there at all, definitely not. There's one other thing I just say in relation to, especially if you're feeding round bales in a round feeder. You know, you have some of these feeders that are up off ground. Some of them, you know, the ewes burrow in. And I suppose, look at in relation to, you'll see there where they eat into the bale and it's all dirty under their necks. In a case like that, look at, it's clay and it's contamination and stuff like that. You should be pulling that away and throwing it out, because, you know, that can lead to listeriosis as well. You know, like the contamination of the feed when they start eating, you know, that stuff. So definitely not. If there's mold on a bale, forget about it. You're as well. Definitely not. Don't feed it, because it's only going to lead to problems, abortions, and, you know, dead ewes and stuff like that.
Yep. That's, I think, all the questions gone through more or less, lads.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, look at it. We had a lot of questions in there, so thanks everyone for putting those questions to the 2 panelists. I want to thank both James and Michael for their excellent presentations, and thanks to Eoghan for covering the Q&A session there. This webinar has been recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll be putting links up on Facebook and our Twitter pages, and just again wanted to remind you about the lamb mortality webinar that we're hosting on the 7th of February, again at 8 p.m. So if you're on this webinar tonight, you're going to get a reminder about it through your email, and keep an eye on our social media channels, and we'll have advertisements in the local paper. So thanks for everybody that signed on tonight, and thanks to the lads that were presenting, and the one who's doing the Q&A. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye
very
now.
much.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.